All right, that's the start. So thank you everyone who's joined us for the July 11th edition 2023 of the DOTI Advisory Board meeting. Got a pretty replete agenda today. We'll kick off with our typical welcome, roll call, and meeting minutes, followed by public comment and a report from DOTI leadership. Today, we'll have three primary focuses on the agenda, one being another foray into the 2024 DOTI budget, in this case, some responses from the department to the earlier letter we provided them, a Vision Zero action plan update review, and a wider topic from the Policy and Operations Committee. Of course, we'll clear up with our typical action items list, odds and ends before we adjourn today. To kick us off, figure we can start with a roll call. So Alan, wondering if you're ready for me to pass over to you or if you need to get that document up.
Yeah, I'll just go through here. Lucia?
Here.
Great. Alicia? Brian? Ian?
Yeah.
Great, thank you, Ian. Jake? I think I saw you.
Here.
Amy, I saw you as well. Welcome. Paul Gonzer. Christopher Johnson. Gary, I think I saw you.
I'm here.
Joe, I think I saw you. Jamie Lewis. As you guys
Absent.
mentioned, absent, thank you. Eileen?
Here.
Great, welcome. Kurt?
I think Kurt term ended.
Okay, great. Thanks, Nanita, appreciate that. Jonathan, I saw you, obviously.
Yeah.
Julie, you were mentioned before, I saw you as well.
I'm here.
Thank you. So
Yeah.
that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9.
And I know
10.
Alicia hopped on just as we passed her name.
Great, welcome, Alicia. That'll be 11. So I think that's quorum,
Hi.
Jonathan.
Awesome. Hey, yes, hello. And I thought part of our agenda today would be welcoming Tinsley, a new member of the board. I thought I saw a name Tinsley join the meeting, but I now don't see it anymore. So maybe she'll be back with us at some juncture so we can welcome her to the board. When she does arrive again, she's taking over the District 11 seat from Joni. Oh, wait, I think that might be Tinsley coming back. Tinsley, can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
Hey, all right, great. I was just sort of introducing you without you here. I wanted to, I thought I had seen your name on here, and then I realized you were gone. So yes.
I had difficulties. I apologize.
All good. So I was just introducing that Tinsley is our newest member of the board here, has just been appointed from District 11 to fill Joni's seat that she recently departed. So Tinsley, if you wanted to take a second to introduce yourself.
Yeah, so my name is Tinsley, and I am a stay-at-home mom currently, but also a social worker. So I'm really loving to be in the community space I'm finding. And I have learned a lot over the past couple of years about Denver, and I'm just really excited to dig in about the far Northeast and talk about some of the discrepancies and some of just to help think creatively and solve problems.
Awesome. Thankful to have you here. Thank you for joining us. I recognize that a bit of what you see today might be, I don't know, sorry if you feel a little out of context on some discussions we've already been having as they come up today. Of course, we're happy to set some time with you to fill you in on a bit of the context and history of how we got to some of these topics offline out of the meeting at some point if you'd be interested. Yep.
Yes, great. Thank you.
With that, we have one final opening item to introduce here, which is a vote to approve our June meeting minutes. Hoping I can get a motion to approve and a second for that.
Motion to approve.
Thank you. And do we have a second?
Second.
All right, thank you very much. So all those in favor of the approving the June meeting minutes as published, please say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
All right. And all those not in favor of approval of the June meeting minutes. Seeing no hands, that's certainly a consensus to approve. Thank you for that. And then that places us on track for public comment. Nanita, do we have anyone for public comment today?
Not today.
Not today. All right, saving us some time. That's actually possibly good here, in that we had a few expanded topics. So with that, we'll dive right on to our report from DOTI leadership. Nick, will be you taking that today?
It will. Thank you, Jonathan. Good to see everyone here today. I will go pretty quickly here. I know we've got a pretty full agenda, but we've got some news to share, certainly. Transition, I think probably everyone on this call is very aware. Next Monday will be the inauguration of our new mayor and a number of new city council members on there. I think I mentioned last time we've had a chance as a department to meet with the mayor-elect on there and kind of give them a overview of all the different things we do. Very, very productive meeting, but very excited to really kind of complete the transition and really dive in and kind of start moving towards what's next on there. Transition committee, we've interacted with them primarily on a staff level, but our executive director, Adam Phipps, was able to last week go out and speak with the committee, and it sounded like it was a pretty fruitful conversation. He was impressed with kind of the level of detail, the questions and things that he was getting on that. So we will see where that goes. I know he will have a big job ahead of him, he being the mayor-elect, on appointing and moving his appointees, specifically the charter appointees, through the city council process on there. So I will would anticipate that we will probably be talking about this for a couple months yet. Adam will likely still be in the executive director position initially on that. And so we'll make sure that he is able to come speak to this group at the August meeting on there. So confident he will still be in that role on there, and so we'll have him kind of come, not make it a weird sad thing on there, but certainly he wanted a chance to address the group again. A few other kind of items. Blake and Market Street bike lane, that has been completed. If you haven't been able to check that out. And one of our members helped us get some good publicity in there. So Alan, thank you for taking the gentleman on the tour on there. That's certainly a project we are very proud of. Out there. Speaking of bikes, last week, or gosh, maybe 2 weeks ago, late June, Bike to Work Day, very successful. We partner with Dr. Cog and their Way to Go program, and I think final count was approximately 18,000 people participating in the region. So that's always heartening to hear and see as we continue to build out a robust bike network out there. And then finally, sidewalk. We can't go a meeting without talking about sidewalk. Administrative work is continuing, really focusing on ensuring that we've got good parcel data and making sure that we've got a viable billing solution. You know, one thing with sidewalks is nothing ever ends up being easy on this. And so even just kind of a billing system, while the ordinance was written to have it be part of the current stormwater bill that folks get, even that required some computer stuff well outside of my area of expertise on there. But I think we are moving forward and are in a good place with that, which means we're probably beyond ready at this point to get our stakeholder input going on here. And so last week I met with one of the proponents. I think most folks are familiar with Jill Lokentor. So we had a very good meeting and nailed down some good, I think, good representation for that committee. We're going to start sending those invitations out with the plan being first meeting will be in person and then move to virtual ongoing, but thought it would set a good tone to do that. And so we are get that finalized. I'm working with our two council partners, Councilman Flynn and Councilman Cashman, on getting them booked and get that kicked off and get that moving. I think that's it. Happy to answer any questions though.
So I saw one coming through the chat immediately. Lucia, did you want to ask that live?
Sure. I thought Bike to Work Day was absolutely incredible, but I was wondering how those numbers compared to years past, if you knew that, because with all the new bike infrastructure, just wondering if it had any kind of impact in that way.
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know offhand, but I'm confident our Dr. Cog partners could share that with me. So yeah, I'll get with them and see if we can't get some data. Certainly higher than 2020. I can guarantee that on that, but very heartening to see that volume of folks out there. And I'll see what I can get as far as past numbers.
That'd be great.
Thanks, Nick. Joe.
Yeah, just for mass consumption. Nick, when do you think the bills will come out? Will that come out with your normal tax bill? For that fee? What's the schedule on that?
So that is still pending. I don't anticipate that it will be this year. So I think as early as possible on there. And this is the challenge. And you may have seen the news article about this, kind of our need for some, what we call phase zero funding, kind of, with this program being funded by fees on that. The challenge is there's a lot of things on the front end. So we've been working very closely and having some productive conversations with our Department of Finance on how we can get some funding for some initial investment in this. So more to come on that, Joe. And that's certainly, I know, something that the public is interested in. And as soon as we've got that nailed down, I'll share it with this group, certainly.
Thanks.
Sorry, I was muted. Alan.
I just wanted, thanks for mentioning the transition committee, Nick. I just wanted to quickly plug, there is a public meeting. Everyone on the board, as well as everyone from Denver, is welcome for the Department of Transportation Infrastructure Committee. It's this Thursday from 6 to 8 p.m. at the Carlin Madison Rec Center. There'll be larger group as well as small table discussions, group breakout sessions. And if anyone needs sign language interpretation or captioning, you can request that to Joshua at vibrantdenver.com as well by the end of day today, I believe it is.
Sorry, Alan. It's already the end of the day. 4:16.
Plenty of time before midnight.
All right, Gary.
Yeah, thank you. Nick, in a follow-up kind of concern about the fees for the sidewalk program. And I've got some experience with the trash collection fee issues that are going on. And that is, we as a homeowners association were never told in advance what those and how that fee would be applied. I understand the sidewalk fee fitting in much better with the stormwater method, or the stormwater clients, if you will. And that makes sense. However, our homeowners association goes through a budgeting process, at the end of the year, and votes at the annual meeting as to what our budget's going to be. It's critically important to understand what that number is, or at least a very good estimate prior to the end of this year for budgeting purposes. If the bills are starting to come out next year, give us an advance, if you would, please.
Sure. No, absolutely. And I think we learned quite a bit from specifically with the HOAs and with the trash process and the billing around HOAs. My HOA itself, I had to join a board meeting and kind of explain how it works and made some adjustments that allows an HOA or the residents to either make a decision on to bill as use it as a special assessment, or to bill residents individually on there. So Gary, I think that is an excellent point on there. And as soon as we can get the information out, certainly the fees that are today, that is a certainty on that. We can work with you or HOAs on kind of an estimate as they are. We don't know, of course, if that will change as part of the amendment process on there. But if someone would like an interim estimate on that, that is certainly something we can help with. But definitely understand the challenge of that. My HOA here, I think, is personally challenged with that as well.
Thanks for the feedback, Gary, and the response, Nick. Before we move on to our next topics, any final questions for Nick today? No, all right. So we are just a hair ahead of schedule here, but moving us on to our first sort of unique topic of the day, 2024 DOTI budget. We wanted to leave room open, Earl, of course, for you to give us any broader updates on the budget process, anything that might have updated, changed, shifted, new learnings we've had over the last month since we met. But the primary focus was today to talk with Nick and Earl about the letter we delivered a couple of months ago. For those who weren't a part of that process, we did deliver a letter that I'll be able to share on the screen here that had a set of priorities for the budget as drafted by our board, separated into high, medium, and low priorities. What we asked in the way of response was simply for the department to take a look at these and give us some sense of what they felt fell in the realm of more or less feasible, more or less complex, where there might be considerations or limitations on areas that we hadn't considered before we get into the later stages of the budgetary process. For those of you who weren't here last year, the budget process, when it sort of reaches the public, really is a sprint. I think it's sort of the latter half of September into early October. There's a very limited period of time in which the budget full numbers are available, and the city council has a chance to act, and we and all the citizens around us have a chance to deliver feedback. So we sent this letter in part to make early intentions of ours known and help us as a group prepare us and our communities for that feedback process. We thought a little bit of response from the department around what felt more or less feasible and in their view would help us narrow and hone some of that focus as we reach that sprint in a couple of months. So that was a lot of background context. Earl and Nick, not sure where you'd rather start, if there are some broader updates about the budget process that you'd like to share first, or if we should hop into that letter that we wrote a little bit ago.
Yeah, so I'll talk to just a few, I guess, items that have been in play here over the last month, and then Nick and I will tag team the broader items in the budget letter. So really over the last month or so, and now we're kind of on the tail end of working through city council priorities. As you know, they sent those over in late May, early June. And so we're cross-referencing that with the current submissions and working through that process. And then we have upcoming here over the next month or so, budget presentations for the city CFO and the mayor, dates to be determined at this point. And then we're also working through sort of budget book narrative items with the Department of Finance, of which I believe the first draft of that book should be out sometime in early to mid-September. I think there's a statutory date of when it's required, but it'll be around then. But beyond that, that's really about it.
All right, yeah, that tracks with what I figured we'd expect here.
Yeah.
Thank you for the update there. As far as our letter goes, would it be easier for me to share on my screen the letter and we move through them? Or I don't know if you had sort of a commented document or presentation you wanted to go through.
I think Nick has a presentation that he put together for these items, and then we'll, I guess, go from there. Is that correct, Nick?
That's correct. So I've got a PowerPoint here with the wish list items. I'm going to go through each of them on there, and then we will follow with kind of a formal response reflecting what was discussed today.
Awesome. Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, super excited. We're about to crack this open. I'm wondering if you have screen sharing permissions or if we need to ask Nanita to help us with that.
We need to ask Nanita, as I just clicked there on there. So while she's doing that, just kind of my standard disclaimer and kind of how you guys phrase the letter, I think, you know, you are aware, we've talked about this before, just on kind of the process for the budget and when things become public and when they're not public on here. So right now, Earl kind of talked about that early fall timeframe when this budget becomes public. We can talk line item by line item by line item on there. But at this point, what I'm going to talk about as we go through this is aligned with what you said. Are these aligned with our priorities? You know, and we think of budget as a priority, as a reflection of our priorities on here. Is this something that maybe is a little bit farther out, or is this something that is a challenge that needs to be that needs to be discussed further on there. And I appreciated it framing that way. So what I'm not going to say today is like, we put this in, man, and if it doesn't go through, we better be mad at someone, that mayor-elect on that. I won't do that on here. So I'm going to talk in generalities, but just know that, of course, these are specific things that have been submitted, and we can go into those specifics once it becomes public on there. So hopefully I vamped enough. Let me try oh yeah, we're looking good. Okay. And this is going to be, if you could shout out. So I've just got two screens here. So I've got my notes on one and the PowerPoint on the other. So bear with me as we go. And if you have questions, shout out, because I won't be able to see them.
Okay, yeah.
All right. Does that look like a advisory board wish list items?
It does to me, yes.
Good. All right. And let me get my notes up here, and I'm going to minimize you all. All right. So we'll go through these. I think there was a total of 18 on here. I broke them down about 5 per slide on there. And like I said, I'm just going to kind of give you a general kind of how this aligns with our priorities and how, I would generally expect you to see it reflected in a 2024 budget on there. So starting with protected bike lanes for greater safety for all road users, it's diverters on neighborhood bikeways, not just new network connectivity, but upgrading current lower comfort bike lanes on there. So this certainly is in alignment with our department priorities and our 2024 department priorities. And kind of before I go into detail, one other thing I wanted to say, this group has provided a lot of good input, and I think really been an integral part of the process of our Denver Moves Everyone plan. And this really will be kind of our Denver Moves Everyone budget when it comes to the transportation aspects of our budget on there. So you will hear a little bit of that today, but just know the more familiarity you have with that, you should see that more reflected in this year's budget request. So going back to protected bike lanes, on that. So we are continuing to look for funding for construction of these high comfort bikeways, protected bikeways, and our community transportation networks. We have a number of targeted areas out there that, based on what comes back on the budget, we'll be able to prioritize and implement. And also kind of to the upgraded bikeways, that's certainly aligned with our priorities on there. Certainly looking for upgrading from protected bike lane from flex posts and rubber curbs to the more concrete construction, are really making things more of a, like said in here, high comfort on here. Next one, North Broadway bike lane extension of north of Spear Boulevard. So this certainly is in alignment, and I can say specifically this is submitted for the DRCOG Transportation Improvement Program TIP funding. Currently is on the wait list for funding as it would come available, and that is, as we get deeper into the TIP cycle, multi-year TIP cycle, if projects aren't able to make, or if there's new sources of funding, the wait list, the ranked wait list on there then begins to receive that funding. So that's where this is. We'll see how that goes. And as we progress. So bottom line, yes, this is certainly aligned. We're hoping for funding through the TIP on there.
Sorry, before we continue, just a quick procedural point I should have asked at the beginning. Would you like us to hold questions till the end of the whole presentation, till the end of a slide, or like item per item? What's your preference?
I would say my preference would be end of presentation, just because I can't see you.
Yeah.
On there. So if that works for you guys, that would probably be easiest for me. And then Earl and I can tag team on those.
Totally makes sense. Yep. Sorry for interrupting.
Thank you. No, by all means. Next, the upgraded First Avenue multi-use path between Downing and University. This is a priority project already identified in our 6-year capital plan, and agree it is a citywide policy on there. So I'll leave it at that. This is certainly a policy that we are moving forward and looking for funding on it through the budget process or through others, but on this, but certainly aligned on that. Eliminate funding for interstate highway expansion on there. Now, I think I took this question not literally as, an I-25 or an I-70, of which we don't have kind of the regulatory power. We don't, that's of course a CDOT on here. That is aligned with our priorities. We're not looking to fund highway expansion projects on there. And that, again, this is what was reflected in Denver Moves Everyone. Increased funding for Vision Zero projects on high injury network, quick treatments, speed reductions, et cetera, by 2 million versus 2023 on there. I think, again, aligns with our priorities, our department priorities on there. And, really, we are every year looking to increase that level of funding on there. So I'll leave it at that. I'd say, yes, this certainly aligns with our priorities, quantity, amount of increase or such to be seen on that, but certainly aligns with our priorities. Change a slide. All right, moving on to rapid flashing beacons. If folks are, I imagine this group is familiar with that, but at a number of intersections and a number of really more mid-block crossings, you'll see these are the flashing pedestrian signs that can be very effective in attracting attention and making sure motorists are aware that pedestrians are moving across there. So yes, this is a nearly annual request that we make. So I would say this certainly reflects with our priorities for 2024 on there. And again, we'll kind of see as we work through the process on the quantity that we were able to achieve on that, but certainly aligned with our priorities on there. Raised crosswalks around school and this potential pilot program for raised crosswalks around schools in each council district. We fund a number of different programs, Vision Zero, the Safe Routes to School. We have not yet implemented raised crosswalks as an agency. And I'm not going to say kind of specifically when that happens on there, but I will say generally that we are exploring kind of some of the alternative treatments like raised crosswalks. And I would say more to come sooner rather than later on that. And then just reaffirm, yes, this would align with our department priorities on there, but really kind of not even just raise crosswalks, but generally looking at different treatments and techniques to slow traffic to ensure that pedestrians have a safe place to cross on there. Funding for timed lights on collectors to slow traffic. Typically, we do about 2 to 3 corridors a year to identify opportunities to better time the signals to make it safer and make traffic flow more safely on there. This is typically an annual request. So again, this is absolutely, I feel like we're very simpatico at this point. This absolutely aligns with our priorities on there. Funding for more leading pedestrian indicators on high injury network streets. This is aligned with this, and these are, this is something that we have started moving towards being able to retrofit existing signals. Rebuilding a signal is incredibly time and funding intensive, and we're at a point now where we can do these without having to go through that whole process on there. So that makes it easier to fund either through budget expansions or existing budgets on that, and certainly aligns with our priorities. And the staff did say, hey, if there's ones you think that are sorely in need, by all means, send those over and we can get those in a queue for analysis on that and make sure we're getting those out as quickly and efficiently as possible. All right. Budget for more dignified bus shelter and shelter upgrades. Focus on shelters that block wind, rain, cold, and with actual walls, whether glass or otherwise. Yes, this is 100%. We for the last couple of years, I believe, we've had what we call a bus stop dignity program. Does not get it to the level described here, but certainly improves beyond kind of the post in the dirt on there, and really exploring. I think we've talked about bus stop infrastructure and how that currently is done in the city. So the majority of the bus shelters that you see are not funded by or maintained by RTD. They're funded by the city through what's called the Transit Amenities Program. and basically that is a contractor is able to advertise and collect the advertising revenue in exchange for that infrastructure and exchange for the maintenance. And that is always going to be the biggest challenge with adding new infrastructure on there is the ongoing maintenance of that. And that can be challenging. I think you saw it in the news on Broadway, kind of an unfortunate situation. I think we recognize there is a need for higher maintenance efforts for these shelters so that we can add more and really make sure that we are not, that we're delivering adequate bus infrastructure. I'm a bus rider and I don't mind the cold, but the sun beating down on you, I can certainly vouch for the unpleasantness on that. So I would say more to come on this, definitely aligned with our priorities on it. I think there's a lot of opportunity. I'll leave it at that. I think there's a lot of opportunity.
Nick, just one additional point on this.
Yes.
With this being much more of a longer term focus area that is for sure going to require the coordination and partnership with RTD, particularly for us to really begin to receive, see results in regards to that. That's been more of one of the more complicated areas, and we're still continuing to work in that manner with them on just broader improvements to bus stops across the city. So,
thank you, Earl. All right, home stretch here. Funding right-of-way enforcement, so specifically around bike lanes, sidewalks, encroachments, parking, things like that. Changes to respond to issues in a timely and a proactive manner. Consider altering the right-of-way enforcement priorities to Vision Zero goals, so around vulnerable users, safety of vulnerable users, instead of focused on metered parking on there. I think in past years, we've had a lot of challenges with right-of-way enforcement just from a hiring standpoint. This will always be one of the more challenging, a right-of-way enforcement agency. I don't think I need to tell this board what a challenging role can be, and thankless. One of the number of really kind of thankless and challenging roles that DOTI supports in the city on there. But I do feel like we are on a better track for that sustainability. I think the question calls out, the right-of-way enforcement is it covers a very broad, it is parking tickets, it's meter rates, it's things like that, but it's also things such as making sure that patios that extend into the right-of-way are being done properly and safely on that. So to that end, we are exploring different options on ways to really maximize the efficiency, whether that's just how we're distributing folks, the processes and procedures on that. And so I think there's some more to come on that one. We will continue to seek support for right-of-way enforcement. The need is not going down, it's only going up, beyond just kind of what's going on in what we think of the road, the bike lane, things like that. But, with the outdoor patios and things like that, making sure that we have that group properly resourced so we can do our best to, from an enforcement standpoint, maximize pedestrian safety and things like that. So certainly aligned, more to come on that one. Continued increased funding for expansion to the very successful microtransit program like Montbello. And thank you for saying very successful. I think we hit a milestone on ridership here recently, and those have been very successful. So I would say 100% this is aligned with our priorities, and 100% we are certainly exploring ways in the short term to expand that to other areas, because it has the success of it in Montbello, I think, has shown that there is a unmet demand that is very exciting for our department to meet. That was one of the explicit things when we converted from Public Works to the Department of Transportation that we put into the charter, was our ability to support and operate transit. And, you see it in things, a lot of people don't see scooters and bikes, the shared scooters and bikes as transit. We do, and we manage it accordingly. But certainly as we're kind of expanding into that area, the connector service has shown that there's a huge need, and we're excited to help continue to try to meet that need. All right. Fire department, coordinating with the fire department to make sure that they're a partner in our Vision Zero efforts, and just kind of making assumptions. Some street treatments, often we are working with fire department to ensure that they are able to get emergency vehicles from point A to point B safely and efficiently. I don't think I have to explain why that of course is important on there. I'm not sure if initially it would be a formal study. I would say that we are really working with them as partners, and certainly find it to be fruitful conversations on that, but to better align kind of their needs with our designs and make sure that we can both kind of meet our values. And by values, for them, it's pretty explicit on there. So I would say aligned. I wouldn't expect a study in the short term, but I think as our relationship grows, I think that is a possibility in the future if we can initiate or get better ideas on best practices beyond what kind of our Vision Zero team does day in, day out. Funding for more automated enforcement of speed limits and red light violations with focus on arterial streets in the high injury network. If you are a state legislature enthusiast, you will know this was one of the more exciting transportation bills that passed through and was signed by the governor this year, that really broadens the availability or the ability for a municipality to implement the photo enforcement on that. And it starts to expand it to with arterial streets. The high injury network really expands the universe of available roads where it can be used. I believe this group had a presentation from Ralph and from our partners in PD. And I will just say, yes, absolutely aligns with our priorities. And we are working to see how we can really take advantage of the new opportunity under the new legislation on there. So definitely aligned with our priorities. Getting to the end here, expand awareness and financial support for the Snow Angel program on this. This is one certainly we are a fan of. This is managed through a different office in the city. It's the Human Rights office on there. And we while we partner with them and certainly would support them, types of budget requests for that program would certainly come through that department on there. So that one is probably, I'd put that in, needs more discussion on maybe ideas on how we can better partner with them to support their program. All right. Let me scroll down here a little bit. All right, increasing budget to plow painted bike lanes in the neighborhood bikeways during snow events on theirs. And this is certainly something after this kind of unprecedented snow year that we have had. We've heard from a number of different sources. And so I would say generally, yes, this is a priority on here. I think this group also understands the challenges right now with snow removal and snow removal vehicles and supply chain challenges. But there is a recognition certainly that as you can't celebrate your bike lanes without the ability to also maintain those bike lanes on there. And so we currently do have a 16-person infrastructure team that handles these snow removal for vertical elements and things like bike lanes. They're split. We do 2 12-hour shifts over a 24-hour period. You probably did the math, and try to get those currently plowed at least once within a storm period. It always a challenge. I think we all saw that this year. Certainly an area of opportunity for us, certainly aligned with the department's goals and values from both a snow removal, safety, and really supporting the multimodal infrastructure that we've all been focused so much on there. So this is certainly one that is challenging. I'd say it is aligned with our goals, and it's going to take some. It will be a challenge to do it, but I mean, like I said, this is aligned with our goals, and if we are going to be a great multimodal city, this is certainly something we'll be investing in. All right, requested areas for existing pedestrian and sidewalk funding for ordinance 307. And I know on here, there's a number of different specific areas, and this is one of the kind of exciting opportunities with ordinance 307. Is that this will be a enterprise fund. And what that means is it is a separate budget, separate from the general fund on there, that allows us more latitude to make those selections. A big part of the first phase of implementing 307 is developing that needs assessment. And that needs assessment will give that kind of broad vision for how do we prioritize. Now, of course, it's aligned with our existing prioritizations around Denver Moves and Denver Right on there. And so I would say on this one, you won't see a specific request in the general fund on this, but that's simply because this is going to be enterprise funded. And there will be a lot of opportunity for those discussions on how it is prioritized and getting down into the kind of project and literal intersection level prioritization on that. That will be a part of that implementation of the ordinance 307 process. Funding to study where Denver might xeriscape currently managed irrigated areas such as medians or other city managed landscaping in the public right of way. If we haven't already, I would encourage you all to ask for a presentation by our green infrastructure team. So some of you may have seen it, you may haven't. If you've traveled on Brighton Boulevard, really kind of what you see, the landscaping on there, while it looks great, it also is a water quality feature and a flood management feature on there. And so that is the team that looks at things like this. Now, medians, we work with parks a lot, whether it's a parkway, a median, things like that. And so this is work that is ongoing and it is currently ongoing. So you likely won't see a specific budget request around that. That doesn't mean this isn't a priority. It is certainly working with our Parks and Rec, and then also Denver Water. I think we're familiar with them and their water water use, the turf grass, and kind of their different initiatives around that on there. So aligned with our priorities, likely won't see a budget request, but that's because the work is going on now. And then increased funding for roadside trash removal, including the support of proactive, innovative initiatives to deal with roadside trash, volunteer days, enforcing laws for commercial property owners to clean up trash. So this, if you are familiar, and maybe you've seen it driving around, we have what we now call the Denver Action Team. And this is a group that is an expansion of our previous graffiti removal team, but has been expanded to include this trash pickup. So it is managed out of our solid waste program. Currently, we have a partnership with DDP for some focus downtown, but that has allowed us to expand our focus outside of the downtown area on that. And so you will see more and more of those folks on there. Certainly aligns with our priority in that cleanliness, and we're very pleased with kind of the progress that's been made in the last year. Our 2023 budget included a number of successful expansion requests on that have helped really get that team up and running, and yep, aligned with priorities. More to come on that for sure. With that, I'm going to try to pull you all back up.
Great. And while you're doing that, I'll intro here. Technically, our agenda says we have 4 more minutes for this. I want to give us until 55 for this, 9 minutes of questions. Do want to preview that, of course. So we've seen quite a few questions coming through the chat. That was a lot of content in a very short amount of time. So I'm sure we have more questions than we can handle in the next, well, now 8 minutes. So I'll preview here that we'll hold some time in the same budgetary topic in our August meeting. So if there are any questions we can't get to in the next 8 minutes or so, Nick said he was going to be sending over a document for us to ponder on. We can prep some questions and have that be a focus of our August meeting with more replete time.
And if I can figure out how to upload those questions, I can try to integrate that into the responses as well.
Oh, okay, great. So with that, that's an interesting point. I'm wondering, we have a few questions in the chat. For those who have had a question in the chat, what would you like Nick to sort of take it offline and try to integrate that in, or do we want to raise some hands and just see what folks want to ask in this amount of time? I might just take hands for those who want to ask a question online, and those of you who asked a question in the chat can either repeat it here or leave it for Nick's review later. All right, Alicia.
I'm sorry, I just wanted to say thank you. I think those recommendations were great, and I wasn't able to join. But one of the questions that I have is really around engagement and more around processes. So I don't know if this is something we should be adding in the budget, but I'm wondering if there has been thought to having a specific line item for more community engagement and outreach. One, to reach those populations that we just haven't been able to reach in the processes that we do have in place, because I think that there are some processes in place that are good for the department. And then two, and to provide some training and education. Everybody doesn't understand DOTI and what we do and how we do it, but to provide some of that education and help them to understand how that impacts their daily lives. But then the other thing that I really wanted to talk about too was, I know that there are larger issues in the city, homelessness obviously being one, or our unhoused neighbors, et cetera, that impact all of the departments across the city. And I'm wondering, just coming from a public health perspective, when we think about the social determinants of health, and our role in this is around that, if we can dedicate some funding to work across agencies, and I'm doing this on some of the other areas with it that I serve in as well, to really support some interagencies, or I don't know, maybe it's not but agencies across the city and county of Denver to produce some of the larger solutions that we may not have thought of yet. And so I'm wondering if there have been any thought given to that.
Yes, I'm happy to take both of those. So to your first about engagement, I can't remember. I think we've had our Office of Community and Business Engagement, and then also our strategic advisor, Dr. Ben Sanders, who oversees that group, integrated with our equity, diversity, and inclusion activities on there. And so that is a choice we made. I think we formed that office in, gosh, I think it was 2019. I think it was one of those where, yay, we're all together. Now everyone go home 3 months later on there. But really have seen that group really kind of take hold, really engage, really kind of expand. How we describe it is, we want that group to be able to talk DOTI to the community and then turn around and talk community back to DOTI. Because I think you said, Alicia, a lot of folks don't know necessarily what we do. I don't believe it, but I've heard that some people can feel our processes can be Byzantine and draconian at sometimes on there. It's a joke, I know, on there. But really being able to be that community voice, both coming from the department, but then more importantly, making sure we're receiving that on there. So kind of going back to my same format before, I would say that absolutely aligns with our priorities on there. And I think you will be pleased with what you see from that group this year, irrespective of what the budget is. And I would be happy. I know that group would love to come and share kind of their strategies and techniques for engagement. And then on the issue of homelessness and kind of how we support that, you're exactly right. That is multi-agency, as I think any topic in the city, and I think we've got, under the Hancock administration, we've gotten to a good place of very collaborative, very kind of outcome-based cooperation between the departments. Now, I know Mayor-elect Johnston, this is one of, if not his top priorities on this, is tackling it. And I think we've made it very clear that we cannot be an independent department silos, that this is, the complexity of this requires the effort from every department that has something to give on this. And so I'm going to probably let the mayor-elect share with you his strategy. I don't know it yet on there, but I would expect that to be a very early and a very public priority for him.
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm not even on mute. Thanks. Yeah, I was just thinking homelessness. I use homelessness as an example, or our unhoused neighbors, but there are a lot of different issues that kind of cross sector between DOTI, housing, public health. So
Absolutely.
Thinking if there is some specific funding from that for each of the departments, it would be great.
Funding, and I would say expectations. I think as we've kind of evolved as a department, and over the past, I can only speak for the last 5 years that I've been here, but I've seen, I think, a market increase in, we have a standing meeting with the Parks Department. I know we have a standing meeting with community planning design, and making sure that, yes, our priorities align with their priorities on it. So I'm filibustering here. I'm sorry. Agreed. Also a priority.
Okay, Tinsley.
So something that Alicia said, I just want to also key in. It kind of brought up another question, so I'm going to just ask two questions in one, basically. Something that I really think that Alicia really tagged on, that is a huge problem with Green Valley Ranch and the surrounding Northeast area, is the outreach concerns. There's not as many events, especially like past the Viaduct for Green Valley Ranch, and we would love to continue to talk about, like off screen even, some opportunities for DOTI to engage more with particularly the Green Valley Ranch area. So I just kind of wanted to throw that out there because I know that definitely Green Valley Ranch is one of those outreach hurdles that Denver is trying to correct. So
yes. And Tinsley, I would say if you have specific things, hit me up directly, because that is absolutely aligned with our priorities. And sometimes it's helpful to have a little bit of an in. So just hit me up directly on that. We'll get something coordinated.
So secondly, my next question is, and I guess this is another contact. I apologize if it is redundant, but who should we contact as a board? Like if we see an intersection that meets one of these priorities, such as like a flashing beacon or flashing stop sign, etc., or specific locations that we want to recommend as far as these priorities go, who specifically should we contact for that as well?
I'd ask, so if it is something I see this and I see an opportunity on there, I'd say I'd ask you to go through Nanita, and Nanita and I can then distribute out to the staff on there. Now, of course, if you see a pothole or if you see, something down, 311, and then you can also email Nanita, but 311 is still going to be the most efficient on that. But for suggestions, ideas, kind of what I mentioned earlier about the LDIs on there, let's go through Nanita and she and I can point guard out to whomever that needs to go to.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Okay, and butting up against time here, just one more question on the line from Lucia.
Thank you. So my question is on item number 4, where it's eliminate funding for interstate highway expansion and to align to better prioritize Denver Moves 2050 goals. So of course, I think what we were thinking about wasn't necessarily, certainly the I-25 interchange is an issue, but also Pena Boulevard.
Yes.
If you look at the general comments from the public comment section, it seemed like when I read them, about 85% of them were against expanding, and there at the time were over 400 comments. And finding a way to move people other than expanding a highway, which induces demand. So how is DOTI fitting into all this? I know it's part of DRCOG as well, but I'd like to know how DOTI figures into this.
And directly, that is ultimately a DEN project or an airport project on there. But, I think one thing that I think eventually did kind of was made more clear throughout that process. And I think you saw that reflected in the council meeting where this was discussed on there is, with the Pena Boulevard program project on there, really what we're funding at this point, and by we, I mean DRCOG, and it's a region on there, not DOTI specifically. This is not something coming out of DOTI's general fund, is a study to look at these alternatives on there. One of them, yes, is a widening, but it really is, I think council really wanted and received assurances that the die is not cast with this project on this. This is really the purpose to see what is the most appropriate alternative out there. But that, and when I, and I didn't mean to be flippant on that when I said, well, we don't do interstates on that. I knew kind of that was where you guys were coming from, that it was the Pena Boulevard. I think that's been the most recent discussion on there. But, even going back to Broadway and I-25, I think we heard, while that wasn't, we certainly weren't funding an expansion of I-25 on there. I do see kind of how there could be some alignment with that. And that is, certainly one reason why you saw us able to and more than willing to pivot on some elements of that project on there.
Thank you.
Okay, all right. In a little over time here for our next agenda topic. In a moment, I'll introduce Rolf, Just a reminder with what sort of I mentioned before, we'll save this chat so Nick can incorporate some of this into the document he initially delivers to us after this meeting in August. After we have a chance to ponder that document a little bit further, we'll reserve the budget time in that meeting to discuss any of the many questions we might have about these responses. So then, with that, would love to introduce Rolf Eisinger. As we've talked about on a prior meeting or two, there's been a large update to the city's Vision Zero action plan. It's the first time in a number of years it's been updated with the prior plan having expired. So we wanted to invite Rolf in today to talk a little bit about its contents, what may have changed since the last plan, what's new news for us, any distinct strategies we're following as compared to the prior time. Actually, I guess really whatever it is Rolf would like to tell us. Thank you, Rolf, for joining us, and I will pass over to you from here.
All right. Thank you again for inviting me to the DOTI Advisory Committee meeting here. And I'm going to try and share my screen. Let's see here. Host disabled.
Let me give you an exit.
Okay. Bear with us here. If folks need to stretch, get up, it's a good time to do that. No, we've been sitting for a little while, but let's see here.
I think you're good now.
Okay. All right. Find the right screen. Go. Okay. Is that sharing, right? We're good?
Yes, you're good.
Perfect. Okay. All right. So all right. Maybe we can skip this first slide a little bit. Wanted to say, let's see. There we go. All right. So yeah, we recently came out with our new Vision Zero action plan. And with this, we recommitted, City and County of Denver, as well as the residents recommitted to Vision Zero. Wanted to just mention that we crunched a lot of data for this new plan, so that we can make data-driven decisions. So the next few slides review some of the data that we looked at, and also some of the themes and the action items that came out of the action plan, and also some of the new areas of focus, I'd say, compared to the old action plan that we'll be looking at diving into for the next 6 years. So today, there's a greater need than ever for Vision Zero. As you can see in our screen, our traffic fatalities have increased, not decreased. Yes, more people are moving to Denver, and the fatalities per population is almost static, but zero is zero. That's our goal. We're not going to give up. We're not stopping until we reach zero traffic deaths and serious injuries. Okay, so what about the national average? You know, yes, we are below the national average and some of our other peer cities, but we can do better. And we still have a lot of work to do. I don't think I have to tell this group that. And with that, again, looking at our data, we looked at the types of streets that the majority of serious crashes occur on, and you probably not surprised about. Arterial streets make up about 83%, and local streets only 7%. So we know where to focus our efforts. When we look at the contributing factors, we see that, yes, driving under the influence, speed, occupant protection, such as seatbelts, children in car seats, those types of contributing factors are all top contributing factors in our traffic fatalities. Just kind of wanted to highlight some of the contributing factors, but I see there's a greater umbrella here that we're going to get into in a minute, especially as we start looking at our guiding principles for Vision Zero. Okay, so speaking of which, we looked at the modes. we see that our vulnerable roadway users overrepresent traffic fatalities, but we also see people who ride transit are underrepresented and are our safest mode. So once somebody is on a bus, somebody is on a train, they're very safe at where they're going. We also see another common thread in our traffic fatalities, and that is almost all traffic fatalities involve a motor vehicle. A motor vehicle is involved in a crash that leads to traffic fatalities. So that is another I guess key point in looking at our modes. Something else I wanted to bring up, and this struck me during the recent NACDO Designing Cities conference that Denver hosted in May. But one of the presenters talked about electric vehicles. So this is something else that we're tracking is the wave of new motorized vehicles. So EVs and their impact on safety. Previously, as we looked at speed at which vehicles travel at and the rate of dying if you are struck at a certain speed. Some of these things, some of these numbers, I want to say it'll be interesting to see as research continues to come out. I have not seen a lot of research in this space, but wanted to bring up that the new EVs are a lot heavier. So if you can imagine, a heavier vehicle may take longer to stop and may have a greater impact when striking a person that outside of a vehicle or a bicyclist or somebody riding a scooter. So something to think about, with our with the previous stats showing that, if you're struck at 25 miles an hour, you have a much greater survival rate, even compared to 35 or 45. But what happens when that vehicle increases by 1,000 pounds, 2,000 pounds, 3,000 pounds? So yeah, something to keep in mind, as well as the speed of which these vehicles can accelerate. Some of these vehicles can hit 60 miles an hour under 2 seconds. I don't think we have a road on our network that is above 55. And to think that, the acceleration of said vehicles can reach those speeds. Just something to keep in mind as we're tracking innovation, other vehicles on the roadways, and what that means for traffic safety. I don't have all the answers, but just looking at some of the data, looking at other modes as they are showing up, or types of vehicles showing up on our roadways, and what we can do in order to improve safety for everybody. Shifting gears a little bit here, despite the increase in death on our roadways, we have seen safety improvements where we are implementing focused projects and studying them. So a few examples include the Lincoln Safety and Transit Project, where there haven't been a single fatality or SBI in over a year, whereas before we were seeing over the several years 5 SBIs and other vulnerable roadway user crashes. Whereas with those improvements, it's made it safer. So we're continuing to track these improvements and show that where we are investing in Vision Zero, it is making a difference. West Colfax, before some of the signal timing, there were 9 fatalities, and it had decreased post signal timing to 1. We did have 1, unfortunately, yeah, so just highlighting the fact that safety is improving where we're investing in these data-driven and safety countermeasure improvements. I believe you all have probably seen this slide before or heard about our rapid response program, but when there is a traffic fatality, we bring a multidisciplinary team together to review the data, crash trends, better understanding, should we go out on site? If we should, what kinds of improvements can be made, short, mid, long-term safety improvements. So this is an example of 20th Street I-25, where we have worked with CDOT to improve this intersection. And something else I'd like to mention about this was looking at the data is important, because when we partner with DPD and their traffic investigations unit, looking deep into the data and seeing that Majority of people who were crashing into the barrier were not Denver residents. Also was late night, alcohol involvement. It spoke to people would come downtown who weren't familiar with the roadway. They may have some drinks, hop in their car and leave downtown, and they weren't familiar with the roadway and crash into this barrier that you can see on the left. So adding additional message board signs, DPD even did some sobriety details in the area, as well as then focus on the street designs. How can we set everybody up for success so they can make it home safely? So through the street design with additional signage, striping, warnings, etc. Okay. Other safety improvements have been, yes, our red light camera have seen decreases of 21, 33, 36, 22 in citations, as in people running red lights at these locations. They definitely have safety benefit. Other improvements that we had installed over the course of several years is our LED street light conversion, our back plates, more of a systemic treatment, making these lights, outline them with these reflective tapes. So they show up better in low light conditions, even if the sun is setting, so sun glare, and if the light is not working, people can still see it. In fact, there is a traffic light there in stop. Okay, so moving right along here, wanted to bring up that, yes, with DME, we used the Denver Moves Everyone plan as an opportunity to align planning efforts to update the Vision Zero action plan. So Denver Moves Everyone helped seek public input to recommit to Vision Zero. And by recommitting to Vision Zero, Denver rejects the status quo that traffic crashes are unfortunate accidents, but we accept that traffic crashes can be prevented by systematically addressing their causes. Below are the principles that will set us on track for reaching Vision Zero. So here are the principles, and they include read these, but I'm gonna highlight some of them. So yes, human life is our highest priority. We talked about people driving motorized vehicles are a constant factor in traffic-related deaths and serious injuries. Speed has a direct impact on the frequency and also the severity of crashes. Traffic deaths are preventable and acceptable. Preserving human life takes priority over convenience. Denver's transportation system should be safe for all users in all neighborhoods, regardless of mode of travel they choose. We make mistakes, but those mistakes shouldn't cost debilitating injury or life lost. So making a system that is as forgiving as possible, continuing to provide safe human behavior through education and traffic safety enforcement or other essential contributing factors to a safe transportation system. And like I talked about, people are vulnerable to speed. Those are similar there. Okay, with that, we did look at our high injury network. So yeah, we updated our high injury network, and instead of just one map, we have a two-tiered system. Tier 1 is where we need to focus most of our resources, being that it has a much higher SBI or fatal rate compared to the Tier 2. But the nice thing is, in looking at the Tier 2, it's a bit of a canary in the coal mine. It helps us identify those corridors that are starting to pop up. And if there's a Tier 1 that is decreasing with crashes, hopefully it would go down to tier 2 or just fall off completely. But it's a bit of a metric way of us being able to track our progress with our high injury network. In addition to the high injury network, we looked at safety focus areas. So instead of just looking at a specific road or corridor, we looked at areas just maybe it could be a few streets off of that high injury network or that major roadway. Downtown is definitely a focus area where we've seen more vulnerable roadway user crashes, severe injuries, and also fatalities. So we also looked at in the plan, looking at our data, what types of movements cause more severe crashes. So we see that making a left turn is a movement that at least vehicles are making that cause a much greater death or serious injury cause. And this could be being broadsided by another car as somebody's trying to shoot the gap, making a left through oncoming cars, and maybe that motorist is looking only at the cars and looking for that gap. And then when they start to make their turn, they don't see a person on a bicycle or a pedestrian crossing. So that's something else. So how can we use this data at those locations to update the light timing, protected phases, those kinds of things to protect our users. Okay, so with a lot of the pre-data and other data that we crunched, we came up with several themes. So again, leaning on DME, the public input, the crash data, these were the following themes that were created. So one key themes is protect vulnerable roadway users with a focus on pedestrian, bicyclists, micro-mobility users, and motorcyclists. Target arterials and crash cluster intersections in our safety focus areas for capital improvements. Improve street design and the use of technology to force safe speeds and behaviors, safe speed behaviors, that is. Number 4, engage in dialogue with local communities to bring about new culture of safety that reduces hazardous driving behavior. So again, seatbelts, distractions, substance use, all have impacts, but really focusing on those locations and the street design, I'd say. Collaborate across agencies on policies, fleet data, and evaluation. So a couple of these things, DOTI has implemented our telematics within our vehicles as improved safety, as well as we are looking at evaluation of our projects even more so. So they're not just looking at crash pre-post numbers, but looking at other metrics such as yielding behaviors for motorists to yielding to pedestrians in our refuge islands or crossings, and those types of evaluations. And then here's a big one. Focus on shifting modes away from driving and building out our transit network. And this speaks to kind of what I was talking about before about that umbrella of behaviors, providing folks a way to still get around seamlessly, safely, and reliable and frequent. So we saw that transit, when somebody's on a bus or on a train, they're very safe. So that if they want to be on their phone, guess what? They can be on their phone and on the bus, and they're not distracted behind the wheel. If they choose to have a drink, they can do so and be on a bus with a professional driver, somebody who's been trained, and this is their job, literally, to get people safely to where they want to go. So therefore, the person is not behind the wheel under the influence, as well as many other behavioral factors that we talked about and see in the data. So I just kind of wanted to highlight that. Wanted to also bring up our Vision Zero actions. We broke them down into three groups, if you will. If you all have reviewed the plan, we have the kind of primary Vision Zero actions. These are the actions that are directly linked to reducing traffic-related deaths and serious injuries. We have our internal actions that talk about what does DOTI need to do internally in terms of staffing up and funding resources in order to implement the plan, and then supportive actions. And these actions we don't have as much control over, such as state legislation over photo enforcement, for example, or seatbelt laws or something like that. But what are some of those other legislative policy updates that do improve behaviors, safe behaviors when people are using the public system. Okay. The action items here, there are 14 of them. We can roll through these if you'd all like. I think I'm still pretty good on time if I look at my clock here. So one is, yes, focus on the safety policies. 2 is create but also implement safety focus area plans. 3, develop a citywide speed reduction team. Also create a crash management team. We kind of have some of these, but really kind of bolster them and make them a little resource them up so they have a greater impact. Talked about our evaluation program. Also talked about work with DOTI's transit program. And I would also, not only DOTI's, but RTD, others, to better align and improve transit on our hydrogen network. Oftentimes we see those align in terms of here's our hydrogen network and here's where the transit network is proposed to be built out. So how can we work together on both those efforts? Increase use of traffic safety cameras, create a car-free or slow zone implementation guide. Number 9 here is develop a safety quick build program. So being able to be a little more nimble and if we identify a crash picture, be quicker at getting safety improvements out on the street, either that be paint post or signal operation improvements, those kinds of improvements. Support the build out of pedestrian and bicycle, micromobility, and transit user networks. Those are the asset classes within the Denver Moves Everyone plan, but just continue to support and work with. Also create a multi-modal safety curriculum K through 12. This is one I get kind of excited about, being that oftentimes we see that children may get maybe some pedestrian education, maybe some bicycle education, but what if we created a wholesale K through 12 transportation safety curriculum that teaches children not only how to walk, bike, safely use micromobility, use our transit network, and also safe driving behaviors if that's the direction that people want to go. So providing the education on all of those different modes, and also then continue to work with the community and support community-led placemaking and traffic calming initiatives. And I think there's a couple more here. So we talked about those two. The last one here, sorry for the duplication. Make the city and county of Denver as government agency a model for Vision Zero adopter, similar to what we've done with telematics in our vehicles, continued training of our operators, and implementing other Vision Zero set improvements throughout our facilities. With that, here are the supportive actions. So like I said, we have the primary actions, we have supportive actions, and then we have some internal actions. So again, the supportive actions advocate for expanded laws that reduce the incidence of crashes due to unsafe travel behaviors, advocate for state level changes to driver education, collaborate with DOTI on implementing Vision Zero principles within projects on our roadways, collaborate with DPD to restart sobriety checkpoints in safety focus areas. Again, collaborate with DPD and the county attorney's office to support training materials and policies. And this could very well, an example of this, I see as working with the new recruit classes so that they better understand the crash data they're inputting into their reports. Department of Transportation, we're making multi-million-dollar decisions based on their information they're garnering from those crash reports. And then increase transportation safety in and around schools by implementing the Safe Route School Action Plan that was recently released last year, I believe. And then here are the internal actions. So, kind of speak to funding the Vision Zero action plan, deliver an annual report. So we'll continue to do that, and then continue to hold our regular advisory committee meetings with key stakeholders. So I know that's a lot. I've spoken a lot here. I'm almost done. But with all of that, integrating equity throughout our projects, our programs, and our policies. We do have an equity framework and a racial equity toolkit. This helps us better understand unintended consequences of our actions, action items, or projects. So running our projects, programs, and policies through that will help us better understand unintended consequences. And that's what I got. So happy to take some questions if there's time.
There certainly is time. Yes. Thank you, Rolf, for the overview. We theoretically have about 7 minutes left for this on the agenda, but I know that we have a shorter action item list today, so we can head all the way out to 5:35 as needed. Wondering if anyone has an initial questions or commentary for Rolf. Alan.
Rolf, thanks so much I know we've brought you in here several times already. Thank you for coming back and spending your Tuesday night with us. We really appreciate it. And the work you do. So 2 questions. The first is kind of regarding, this is a big plan, an ambitious plan for an ambitious goal. Where do we as DOTI stand with the budget on this, with the staff headcount for dedicated Vision Zero folks, and what is the goal needed to fully implement this plan?
Good question. I don't know if it's so much of I feel like I'm hearing, is there a dollar amount? Is there a budget in order to completely implement the plan? I would refer to a couple things. One is, if we're implementing the Vision Zero principles within our work, we're much more likely to get to zero quicker. So regardless of project, if we're implementing those principles within, a bridge project or some other project, that'd be the best way to do it, is institutionalize Vision Zero, integrate the principles. So that's one. 2 would be referring to the Denver Moves Everyone plan. I believe they have unconstrained metric of, in order to reach the goal of safety within that plan. I think they have some dollar amounts in there that is an area that I direct your attention to.
Great. Thanks for that. I guess. So going back to that question, how many staff just do Vision Zero today, out of curiosity?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I'd say that we all do it. We are all geared towards improving safety, regardless of mode, where people are traveling, regardless of our project. But with the new Vision Zero action plan and with the new updated principles, and kind of refocusing our efforts also on our hydrogen network and those safety focus areas, and also acknowledging that transit, in fact, is the safest mode, using that new data to better align our resources and our efforts, and kind of rethinking, I guess, transportation safety through that lens, I think, is where we're going to get to.
Great. Thanks so much. I guess my second question was around thinking about the impacts of, maybe it's more of a public health question. In the Vision Zero philosophy, does the impact of air pollution, whether it be particulate matter pollution and things like that, does that come into the philosophy at all of thinking about early incidents of deaths and mortality due to the current transportation system we have from cars? Is that in the conversation at all with us or any other Vision Zero programs out there?
That's a good question. I'd say that, for historically speaking, Vision Zero looks at traffic crashes and deaths resulting from traffic crashes, not necessarily environmental particulate or something else. I'm not quite sure Yeah, maybe you get, I mean, I get where you're going with that, but seeing if there's additional information that you can maybe speak to on that.
No, that's helpful. I was curious if the long-term public health impacts of the transportation system. I'm hearing this is like really just focused on crashes and the resulting impact from it. So that's helpful. Thank you.
Sure.
Jake.
Sorry, my mute took a while. Thank you, Rolf, for coming as always. You're one of my favorite presenters because you got the good data always. And so appreciate your time. I did have some questions around the education program a little bit. I'll have to admit and be candid that I have some bias against education programs. I'm really skeptical of them, given how I've seen them planned in the past. I think that, you know, some recent CDOT ones come to mind, like the Just Make Eye Contact, which was a huge, expensive push, and our traffic deaths are way higher than ever, and speeding is consistently the problem. Or things like Click It or Ticket, when we just know that those are not, I mean, those are important life safety tips, but they are not really the source of our problem. And I have to admit, when I first heard the school one, I had some concerns because I had those in my Denver public schools classes growing up. I was told that I needed to wear bright colors walking across streets, that I needed to make eye contact with drivers, all things that put a lot of burden on the actors that we're trying to promote. And so I guess I wonder why invest in K-12 education, not in trying to either put all that money into systems approaches and signage on the streets, right, that informs drivers of correct behaviors, or traffic enforcement. I think, you know, it's the people that are driving into the people that are walking across the street that are really the problem, not the students. And so I have to admit, that kind of raised some concerns for me. Obviously I want our kids to be as safe as possible crossing streets, but I don't know, I'm just worried about whether that's the best place to fund that.
100%. So point of clarification too on that, and I think would resonate well, is that I'd say focusing more on trip planning, even for pedestrians. How do you ride a bike? You know, if children don't have a place to learn to ride a bike, then chances are they won't be riding a bike later on. So providing, you know, how do people actually ride a bike? How to maybe even do some basic bike maintenance. So if they get a flat tire, they can fix their vehicle in order to get them where they need to go. Also understanding how to ride the transit system, so that we can inform people as like there are other modes other than driving a car in order to be able to get to where you need to go, and these are how to do it. Do we have another way of being able to educate and share and expose, you know, children to these other modes of how to get around our city? And you know, this would be an example of doing that. So I see it more in terms of tooling up our future multimodal transportation users on all of the different modes that we're trying to accommodate within our city, and less of a focus on kind of what you're saying too. So hopefully that helps.
Yeah, I think so. And then real quick, my second question was, I really hear you on the weight of the vehicles, and I'm kind of wondering where the city can play a role in that. I mean, not even just the weight of the vehicles. I know pickup trucks are the #1 selling vehicle in America, and most of them, the hood height is over your average female these days, which means that they cannot be seen if they're crossing directly in front of the vehicle. And so is there any way, I know that NHTSA is a complicated beast. Does the city get asked for feedback from an agency like NHTSA, or are there ways that I know it's a federal problem, the size of these vehicles right now, but I think it is a serious factor in what we're seeing on the street, and wondering if there's a role the city can play in that, or maybe it's even an education program when people are buying vehicles. But it's becoming pretty problematic.
I think that just really quick on that point, that's one of those things that is largely outside of the control of anything that we would have the ability to do. I mean, just like when any new vehicle comes on a road, and we want to submit, or anybody wants to submit, sort of concerns or anything related to that, to the National Transportation Highway Safety Board, or all the regulatory bodies in regards to that, I think that's probably probably one of the few things that we can do, especially by the time new vehicles are coming out. It's just like this, the ship's already sailed, right? And so I think maybe focusing at the local level on the things that we can control and things that we can really have an impact on versus the things that might be borderline of a different stratosphere.
I guess that's why I'm curious about education at the dealer level in the municipality itself as an option. But I think some people buy these vehicles with a perceived sense of safety, and like backup cameras are mandatory in vehicles because many drivers were running over their own children. So like obviously educating them that there are some safety downsides to vehicles of this size seems like something we could do at a local level as well. But that was just my thought there.
And I don't see other hands. I did have a couple quick questions of my own before we move along here. Wanted to understand a little bit about, and you touched on this, but I was hoping you could expand on it a little bit. We asked some questions about sort of the size of your department, like who's working on this, and any potential budget shortfalls here. On a related note, I'm wondering about the scope of your agency and mandate. You've touched on a lot of areas and actions that one might say like intrude on other departments' ownership areas or responsibilities. To what extent do you and your team and sort of the carriers of this plan have the capability to step into other parts of the department and say, like, we need to get this done, as opposed to sort of you using, I guess, soft power to influence others to do it? To what extent do you have that agency and mandate?
That is, yeah, good question. I'd say that there are many agencies have their strategic plans, and safety is part of many of the plans. Therefore, aligning our safety goal with other safety efforts help them reach their goals as well. And Denver Moves Everyone, safety is one of the primary goals. So therefore, by implementing the Vision Zero Action Plan will help us reach that overarching goal within the Denver Moves Everyone plan. Maybe Earl could speak to the kind of more authority.
I think with anything, when it comes to ideas and influence, we as a department, if there's anything, little or small, or big or small, I'm sorry, that needs to be raised in awareness, and we've determined that that's a priority. And it's anything really, has to be evaluated within sort of the context of the entire department, particularly for department-wide initiatives. And so we want to make sure that on one end, making sure that things that are really important, that we're giving those things the time, the resources, and the place to talk through and collaboratively work through what that should look like. But I think that it kind of varies and depends on the issue.
And I mean, I thank you, Earl, for that, and also gave me time just to collect a thought. The mayor did sign off on this plan. This is a priority of the mayor, and therefore we are held accountable to these outcomes through our annual reports will help track how we are doing. And hopefully that, helps hold accountability to ensure that we are in fact implementing the action plan.
Yeah, totally makes sense. And one question that I'm not sure you would have the answer to. You talked a little bit in your presentation about how we have a big focus on arterials, and that's where we see the most SBIs and most deaths. I feel like I have been hearing that we're seeing a lot more and more of that happening on our collector streets in Denver, especially those that tend to match some more arterial level speed limits or have older designs that match arterial types. I'm wondering if you know offhand whether this is the case. Are collectors increasingly becoming a problem that we need to address in some capacity? If so, should we be including them in under further consideration in plans like these? Or were they discounted? Oh, sorry, not discounted, but were arterials favored because they continue to be sort of far and away clearly a primary focus area for us?
Yeah, and that's why we have the updated high injury network highlighting those streets. The tier 1 showing a rate per mile of over 20 SBI and fatal crashes, as opposed to the tier 2 that is just above 3, regardless of roadway type. Is how we run our high injury network. So you can probably look into that and pull out which segments are on collectors or arterials, but regardless, if there's a crash picture and it is on the high injury network, that is where we need to focus.
Got it. Yeah, thanks so much. And one last question from Joe.
Yes, thank you very much for that great presentation. Very clear and all that. I was just wondering, it's probably a lot of politics, but now that we have changed the red light camera rule, is there a new emphasis? Or are we waiting on the politicians to kind of say what to do? That is, we have this golden opportunity to really, I think, decrease speeding right now, and we should jump on it. But is there something kind of holding you back from doing that? Is it funding? Is it politics? Is it we're not prepared? I mean, what can we do to really take advantage of the gift we've been given, or we haven't lost? Right.
Yeah, it is in our action plan. It's an action item that we will be looking at and looking to figure out how best to implement. Where does the data tell us to implement in terms of either be a red light and speeding, and then how to do it. Sounds like there will be some additional possibly public involvement in the process from the new bill, but having to dive into that a little more closely and work with DPD on a partnership with moving that forward to exactly what you're saying. How can we most effectively use this proven safety countermeasure to improve safety?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Awesome. Well, we're over time here for this one. Rolf, thank you again so much for not only the work you do, but coming to join us today. If any others have more questions about maybe narrower specifics of the plan that we couldn't address today, feel free to reach out to me. I can pass those on to Rolf, or perhaps you can reach out to Rolf directly. But I do want to make sure we have enough time to talk with our Policy and Operations Committee. So thank you, Rolf.
All right. Thank you all. Have a great day.
Mm-hmm. All right. So next and functionally kind of final topic we have for today, we wanted to leave time for our committee report outs. As usual for the last few months here, we've kind of had our budget discussion for the day. So skipping over the Budget and Finance Committee. But Gary and Jamie drafted a letter on behalf of the Policy and Operations Committee that they wanted to preview with our group today to determine whether we wanted to vote on sending it out, or if we wanted to open to opportunity for members of the broader board to comment on the letter over the course of the next month, take comments, feedbacks, and perhaps clean up and send during next month's meeting after we've had a chance to review. Spoiled a bit of the takeaway there, but don't want to take over too much of the discussion. So with that, I think I'll hand it over to Gary. I think, Gary, you wanted to represent the letter on today's call. Is that right?
Sure. Thank you, thank you for that opportunity. I first of all want to openly apologize to Jamie for misspelling his name. That won't happen again. But his leadership of this policy committee has directed us, which is very appropriate, on several what we'll call kind of high policy level issues. This being the first of several that you'll probably be seeing, as time goes along, and it will be in pretty much the same format. We'll issue some sort of white paper, letter, memo to describe the issue and ask for action of some sort. So, having said that, this particular matter has to deal with basically the unsightliness of orange fencing and or what they call aggressive landscaping in the medians in most of the older neighborhoods in Denver. I live in the Southwest and I don't see any of that, but I do have direct knowledge of those types of instances that are representative in the photographs that were provided with the memo. You can read through, and I hope you have had a chance at least to glance through this memo, but we're promoting decreasing the use of these fences, and basically have come with the recommendation to prohibit or revoke the use of permits to use these fences in any way. And then earlier on in the conversation this afternoon, we talked about right-of-way staffing, right-of-way enforcement, and that sort of thing, which this obviously would become under their purview to enforce. But the bottom line is that the policy committee sees that our recommendation is to revoke the use of fencing permits except for strictly construction purposes only. Now, that is the policy, or that's the stance or the position of the policy committee, and we would like then to take comment, as Jonathan has said, on this, and actually have some vote movement, whatever is appropriate, to move this through formal DOTI leadership. So that's my overview. Any questions that now I'm going to put Joe and Lucia and Jake on the dime here as well, because they're part of that committee. So anyway, go ahead. Let's have an open discussion or a vote. Love to have a vote just today, then we take care of it.
You all get a chance to see the letter?
Yeah, I put something in the chat. Just, we've had so much public comment about this, and I mean, I'm ready to vote because like we keep hearing about this time and time again, and I feel like it is time for us to act.
That's the way we feel.
So I guess my comment there would be that I did get the letter, but not until today, unfortunately. So I've only had a chance to sort of give it a brief review. I would advocate for us to have a chance to, digest and send response questions or discuss them even here before sending. So I would probably advocate for a vote next month or over email, like in between these sessions to send, just so we have an opportunity for those of us that like couldn't review adequately today. That's just a procedural thing. I actually have a couple questions about the letter as well, but I don't want to interrupt hands. And I know Tinsley's raised a hand here.
First of all, I think that's very appropriate. So I'm not advocating a short circuit here.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Tinsley, hey.
Hi. I kind of agree. That's kind of where I was going to, because I haven't even had a chance to even look at the letter or review anything about this. So while I know you guys are so anxious to get this sent off, I would just really like at least a short time to review, and if there's any comments that I can put forth that you guys are interested in, then that would be great. But I would like to personally just spend a little bit of time kind of just thinking about it and looking through it.
Yeah, and travel around some of those neighborhoods that you may recognize, or as I mentioned, Capitol Hill for sure.
So comment or question of mine about the letter, as opposed to the procedural process around it, echoing what Julie said here. We've had, and others, of course, we've had a ton of commentary from the public, from within our group, et cetera, about this over the last year and change. I know there's been specific issues we've investigated around 311 reports and otherwise. So definitely don't discount the priority on this. I think I have a question about the policy that is being recommended. It looks like it says the policies committee's recommendation is to revoke the use of fencing permits except for construction purposes. And I think I have an open question in my mind as to whether the instances where we are seeing fences have a permit, because I know that was an early question. It wasn't even that what we were thinking early on was not that the city was approving a bunch of permits for people to put fencing and other obstructions within the right of way. It's that people were doing it without a permit. So my only worry is if we don't know that the city's giving permits and then people are using them, if we say the recommendation is to revoke the use of fencing permits, if people already aren't asking for them, if they're not asking for permits and they're putting things up anyway, I don't know that that's going to help solve anything. Does that question make sense? I guess. Yeah,
it absolutely makes sense. And let me respond quickly, and then Joe and Lucia and Jake have at it as well. But fencing appears, whether it's someone's intent to ask for it to be there or not, is what you're getting at, Jonathan. The question then becomes, we're happy to entertain language in this request of DOTI that narrows down the specific results of what we're asking for. And basically what we're asking is move the fence if it's not having to do with construction. And again, I mentioned already that it comes down to an understaffed, overworked right-of-way enforcement group. So maybe it includes hire a person, the recommendation is hire one specific person to deal with this or something, if we can do that. Does that make sense to you? I understand exactly what you're saying, John.
Great. Yeah. I was just trying to say, definitely don't disagree with the goal. I was just wondering if this is the way to get there. But Joe, I see you have a hand.
Yeah, I mean, that was a very good discussion. And I thought, and interesting enough, that if you're going to have a building permit, you have to post a permit. And you have to show that and everybody can see it and know what's going on. And there's zoning permits you have to post. I don't know if we want to go in the direction of requiring them to post the permit that they got and then how long it runs or something like that. But right now, there's nothing like that. And so if you're walking by, you can just say, oh, okay, it must be fine. And I think if we did find out that more than half or even, a handful of these things weren't even permitted, then the neighbors could really, say, hey, this has got to go. And we'd have more force behind it. Right now, I think everybody just probably walks by and thinks, oh, well, if they're accepting it, I guess I'll just live with it. I don't know, that's just a thought. But certainly there's got to be something that we know that these fences are done legally. And that's one way to do it.
Yeah, if I can, I might add the color that I do think the neighbors told us that these aren't permitted and they tried to do something. They came to 3 meetings in a row last year begging us to get something done on this. There hasn't been any action. I think, Nick brought on some people, clarified that these are not permitted for this use. Basically, there's some allowance for seedlings of grass to put in a 6-inch fence, which was kind of what the permit is for. And there was a 9 News article in 2020 in the fall, I believe it was in September of 2020, that had a picture of a fence. And in that article, DOTI was quoted as saying there are no permits, and that fence is still up today. The one in the picture of the article 3 years later now. So I think I unfortunately didn't get a chance to review this too much just from some personal time, but I think that and then one other point, in this letter, we talk a lot about easements, but I think to clarify, these are mostly in the right of way, aka like city land, not easements. So I don't know if that needs to be clarified too, but I don't know. I am the rep for most of this community that's feeling this pain. And I got to be honest, I'm at a bit of a loss because the neighbors have been begging for help for 3 years. I don't even know if the memo will make the difference because we just aren't getting enforcers out. We begged the department to let us get approval to have neighbors go out and put notices up. The city declined that. So it's both a staffing issue and we're not open to alternatives on staffing. So I don't know. I hate to be defeatist. I just am not understanding why we're not able to make progress on this. And I normally like to be the cheery optimist that says we can get solutions here, but I'm kind of really frustrated at this point that we've all acknowledged that this is illegal. There are no permits and we can't solve it. So I don't know what it says about us as a city if things are illegal. It bothers everyone's neighbors and we can't do anything about it. But I don't know. I'm a bit of a loss. Sorry, Lucia. I'll end my rant.
So 25 years ago, and I'm dating myself here for sure, the city used to have a program. The city used to have a program that was called Neighborhood Ambassadors. And it was a slip of things we had in different areas. And it was based on neighborhood inspectors. So instead of the neighborhood inspector having to go out, you would put it on their door, but or knock on their door or put it in their whatever. And it was said very nicely, hey, hey neighbor, just so you know, these things are, a lot of people just don't know regarding different items that are legal or illegal. And to me, the fact that the city wouldn't let neighbors go and do it, that's a shift. Because they went from having a neighborhood ambassadors program to now we don't want anyone doing anything. And I don't know if this is just a bunch of cover your ass kind of behavior, I don't know.
Yeah, no, I can see why, Jake, you're feeling some frustration here because I know we have been talking about this for over a year now and have explored a variety of alternatives. Definitely don't want it to seem like the lack of taking a vote on anything today is meant to be punting this issue. What I'll coordinate after this call here is a format for us to submit comments, feedbacks, or revisions to this draft of the letter so that we can get either an electronic vote for delivery out for send between meetings or ensure we have a vote by August at the very latest. So do want to make sure we're taking action here because to some extent, we've had a lot of these conversations that Jake and others have mentioned that have been frustrating for one reason or another. But I don't think we've ever actually submitted anything formal. And so I don't think that it would be harmful for us to lay out what we've just said. We feel like we've explored all alternatives here. We've assessed the legality. We've recommended alternative enforcement solutions, et cetera, and we'd like help understanding where to go next, given our set of recommendations have sort of run up dry in the past. So yeah, definitely supported myself of an effort like this. I'll work with Jake to help coordinate the sort of feedback mechanism so we can make sure we get this out the door as soon as possible.
I'd like to hear this, Joe, from Nick. Do you have any insight to help us with it, being probably involved with it even longer than we have been?
No, I mean, I think you guys are hitting the points here. I think, when I get that letter, assuming I get that letter successful on there, I'll talk with our operations team, kind of the same gentlemen that have helped us out here before. But yeah, I look forward to getting a letter.
Could I ask then one thing, Jonathan and Jake, that our committee meets on the, what is it, third Wednesday of every month, which is next week. I'm wondering if you could put a quick deadline on, comments for, so that we could have the benefit of talking about the comments at our next policy meeting.
Absolutely. I know it's Tuesday now, so this will probably feel a little bit short, but I can get a request out tomorrow morning, which will lead, and I can set a deadline of either Friday or Monday. Monday might be better, just given the amount of time, but that should still give you a 2-day set before your Wednesday meeting. Yeah. All right, and don't want to run us over time. Typically we close with action items and action items review and an odds and ends list. We actually don't have any outstanding action items from prior meetings right now. The one net new action item we have just formed is one I'm committed to get this feedback and review out tomorrow morning related to this letter. So I will have that out tomorrow morning for just a little bit of a response on a prior action item, which was to collect feedback about potential new board discussion topics moving forward and developing those priorities. Wanted to let you know, thank you all for those who submitted that feedback. Jake and I met to review an initial pass of those top priorities from all of you. We are currently in the process of trying to organize them into themes where we had some overlapping comments or concepts from people, organize them into themes. There are also some we identified that we don't feel that we have enough clarity on. So we'll reach out to the folks who submitted those to say, could you give us a little bit more detail to see where this fits? Our intention is to bring that back to this group, possibly in August, just given the amount of timing we'll have. Possibly in August to take a look at those themes and what we're sort of describing as sort of like summary statements that we might turn that into for department requests for presentation, discussion, and those with this group. So just, I think the short summary of that is we will have more on that by next meeting. We just need a little bit of time to collate those responses and reach out for follow-ups. Tinsley, I know you were also not on that request, so I'll pass that form over to you as well, just so you have a chance to give input there before we close that out.
Thank you.
Totally. And with that, we're at 6 p.m. So thank you all so much for joining today, and we'll hopefully see you all in August.
Thank you, Jonathan.
Thank you.
Have a good night, everyone.
Thank you.
This was a great meeting. I think we're really hitting our stride, so.
Yeah. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Joe.
Bye.